it's also really nice to pick up a book and just sink into it, into a world that you know nothing about, a world you're not prepared for. So much of what I tend to read, unfortunately, I sort of know what to expect. I know from the first page or so what kind of world I'm entering. In this book, in David Lukas's book, The Oracle of Stamboul, I just sunk into it, and it was such a wonderful thing, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the wonderful energy and terrific invention of this book that took me to Istanbul in 1877, in the waning days of the Ottoman Empire. Among other things, many, many other things, this book is about how one extraordinary girl can change the course of history. And her name is Eleonora. But I'll say a little bit about Michael before I start. Michael's the author of The Oracle of Stamboul, which came out last year. He's been a Fulbright Scholar in Turkey, a night shift proofreader in Tel Aviv, and a waiter at the Breadloaf's Writers' Conference in Vermont, which is quite prestigious. It is. It's the best to be a waiter. A graduate of Brown University, his writings appeared in Virginia Quarterly Review, Slate, National Geographic, and many other places. And Michael lives in Oakland, nearby. And I also want to thank Peg for putting on this wonderful reading series. I think it's become one of the great events in the Bay Area. And I'm very happy to be back. Chapter 1. Eleanor Cohen came into this world on a Thursday, late in the summer of 1877. Those who rose early that morning would recall noticing a flock of purple and white hoopoes circling above the harbor, looping and darting about as if in attempt to mend a tear in the firmament. Whether or not they were successful, the birds eventually slowed their swoop and settled in around the city on the steps of the courthouse, the red tile roof of the Constanza Hotel, and the bell tower atop St. Basil's Academy. They roosted in the lantern room of the lighthouse, the octagonal stone minaret of the mosque, and the forward deck of a steamer coughing puffs of smoke into an otherwise clear horizon. Hoopoes coated the town like frosting, piped in along the rain gutters of the governor's mansion, and slathered on the gilt dome of the Orthodox Church. In the trees around Jakob and Leah Cohen's house, the flock seemed especially excited, chattering, flapping their wings, and hopping from branch to branch like a crowd of peasants lining the streets of the capital for an imperial parade. The hoopoes would probably have been regarded as an auspicious sign, were it not for the unfortunate events that coincided with Eleanor's birth. Early that morning, the 3rd Division of Tsar Alexander II's Royal Cavalry rode in from the north and assembled on a hilltop overlooking the town square. 612 men, 537 horses, 3 cannons, 24 dull gray canvas tents, a field kitchen, and the yellow and black striped standard of the Tsar. They'd been riding for the better of a fortnight with reduced rations and little rest. And all that morning, and late into the afternoon, the men of the 3rd Division rode rampant through the streets of Constanza, breaking shop windows, terrorizing stray dogs, and pulling down whatever statues they could find. They torched the governor's mansion. They ransacked the courthouse and shattered the stained glass above the entrance to St. Basil's Academy. The goldsmith's was guttered, the cobbler's picked clean, and the dry goods store strewn with broken eggs and tea. They shattered the front window of Jakob Cohen's carpet shop and punched holes in the walls with their bayonets. And yet, she's born. And I'm going to move forward into chapter 3. In spite of Aunt Ruxandra's repeated efforts to shoo them away, the hoopoes that had attended Eleanor's birth settled permanently in a fig tree outside the Cohen's house, as a result of which the front walk was perpetually splattered with a slick coat of green and white bird droppings. It was not clear at first why the flock was so intent on inhabiting this particular tree. why they would tolerate broom and bleach and boiling water when there were any number of more hospitable roofs nearby. With time, however, it became apparent that their attraction was connected in some way to Eleonora. It was almost as if they regarded her as part of their flock, the queen without which their lives had no purpose. They slept when she slept, stood guard while she bathed, and when she left the house, a small contingency broke off to follow along overhead. They were strange birds, in both appearance and behavior, but eventually Eleanor's flock became a part of daily life, a familiar fixture atop East Hill, and the townspeople paid them no more attention than they did the pigeons lined up along the gutters of the Constanta Hotel. We'll skip ahead a little bit, I'm moving around a little bit, but I want to go into Eleanor's first memory here. Eleanor's first memory was of an incident that took place just after her 4th birthday. It was on the halcyon blue afternoon in early fall that she first realized the power of her concentration. Barefoot and dressed in a simple red cotton smock, Eleonora sat cross-legged under the tomato vines, digging a hole in the wet, clumpy earth with her fingers. There was a warm breeze blowing up the hill. The hoopos were chattering among themselves, and from the back steps one could see all the way to Navodari. She had just scooped up a shiny gray pillbug and was watching it unfurl itself in her palm when she heard a rustling at the edge of the garden. It was a deer, tentatively poking its head out from the forest, and she watched it take a step forward into the onion patch, then a half step back. To see a deer in the garden was not unusual, but there was something about this particular young buck that caught her attention. After observing the animal through the tomato vines for a few moments, Eleonora decided to investigate. Brushing the pillbug back into its hole, Eleonora stood and crossed the garden. The deer did not move, though it seemed anxious being in such close proximity to a human. Standing at the edge of the onion patch, less than an arm's length away from it, she could feel its warm, sour breath on her forehead. She looked up into the polished granite of its eyes and brought her hand slowly to rest at the base of its neck. Still, it did not move. Beyond the quivering of its nostrils and the soft rise of her own breath, both stood completely still. Then, in one motion, the buck stepped back and lowered its antlers, lifting its left leg like a soldier presenting its weapon for inspection. Eleanor immediately saw the cause of the animal's distress, and she knew what she would need to do. Just above the hoof lay a barb, a twisted piece of metal buried deep in the flesh. It looked as if it had snapped off of a fence and perhaps some hunting implement. Brushing a strand of hair out of her eyes, Eleanor took the injured limb in her hand and inspected the wound. The veins around it were pulsing frantically, and a white froth bubbled up against the metal. The deer's leg hair bristled as she brought her free hand towards it. She blinked, and with one swift tug, removed the barb. And watching the deer bound off through the forest, Eleanor quivered at the thought of what she had just done. The hoopos above her broke into a chorus of throaty chirps, and the very crunch of the underbrush sounded like a subtle applause. Her ovation, however, was not long to last. A moment later, she was caught up by her armpits and carried to the bathroom. "You must never," Aunt Ruxandra said, pulling her frock up from her head, "ever do that again. If this gets out..." She stood, hunched over herself, shivering in the middle of the bathroom while Ruxandra prepared a washcloth. Eleonora had never seen her aunt like this. She seemed shaken, scared almost. "What do you mean, Ruxandra? What did I do?" In lieu of a reply, Ruxandra began scrubbing vigorously with a soapy washcloth, first the arms, then the hands, especially between the fingers. "Please," Eleanor whined, "tell me what I did wrong. I can't be better if I don't know what I did." Ruxandra stopped scrubbing. "It's not normal to cavort with animals. We have enough trouble as it is being Jews and your father constantly shipping carpets to Istanbul. The last thing we need to do is attract more attention." "But it was hurt," Eleanor said. "There was a piece of metal in its leg. It wanted me to help." Ruxandra dunked the washcloth in cold water and began scrubbing again. I don't care what you think that deer wanted. I don't ever want to see you doing anything like that again, and I don't want you to tell anyone about this, not even your father. Do you understand me? Eleanor knew better than to protest. When the bath was over, she told Ruxandra she was very sorry for what she had done and would never cavort with animals again. That, she supposed, was the end of it. And in a way she was right. Her aunt never mentioned the incident again. Even so, Eleonora couldn't help but think there was a connection between the deer and Ruxandra's announcement the next morning at breakfast. It was high time, she declared, that Eleonora begin to learn the art of housekeeping. These skills would serve her well for the rest of her life. They would help her attract a good husband, and what was more, empty hands invite the devil. Although Jacob expressed some reservations about the plan, he deferred his authority on the matter to Ruxandra, who assured him that Eleonora was more than up to the task. With that, it was decided. The first lesson, Aunt Ruxandra proclaimed, will be sewing. Stop there.